everyone, it's Meg, and today I'm going to be sharing my favourite books I read in 2020. 2020 has been a year to say the least, but despite all the chaos and everything that has gone on, I've actually had a really amazing reading year. I have read, from when I filmed this video, 58 books, which is amazing. It's the most amount of books I've ever read. I'm hoping I'll be able to get to 60 by the actual end of the year. Like, that would be amazing if I could. But yeah, so I've had an amazing year, even though I don't feel like I've read quite as many amazing books as last year. I feel like I had a few more disappointments this year, which is obviously fine. Reading years change just depending on what books you read. But I actually have 11 books. I have done this video twice in the past, I believe, and I do top 10s and then I may do some honoraries, but I've done 11 books this year because the two are like at the number 10 spot are kind of equal. I couldn't decide which ones to include, so I'm including both of them. So I'm going to share with you guys 11 books, 11 of my favourite books that I read this year, and they're not really in any particular order. I'd say the first two books on this list are kind of at the number 10, 11 spot, and then the last three books are definitely like my number ones. Like, I can't choose, so they're all going to be like my number one spot because I adore them so much. But yes, without further ado, let's get into the video. So the first book on this list is The Kiss Quotient by Helen Huang. And this book took me completely by surprise. I listened to it on audiobook earlier in the year, and it's kind of like my first steamy adult romance, and I enjoyed it a lot more than I thought I was going to. I love the characters in this so much. I love the storyline, I love kind of the relationship between our two main characters, and there was just enough smut for me. I feel like the balance between smut and romance was actually very well done. And it was so much fun. I really enjoyed it. It did have a little bit of a deeper meaning as well, which I really enjoyed. And yeah, it was just really wonderful, and I really enjoyed the audiobook as well. There's nothing special about the audiobook, but I did really enjoy it. So yes, I would definitely like to read more of Helen's work in the future, and I'm really glad that I ended up reading this book because it was definitely a surprise. And then the next book that we have in the number 10, 11 spot is The Upside of Falling by Alex Light, and I did a whole vlog doing this book, so I will leave it in the description if you want to go and watch that. It's spoiler free, so if you haven't read the book you can still watch it. But this is another book that I didn't know what to expect, and I read this in about a weekend. It's not very long anyway, but I read it very fast, and I just devoured this book. It's one of those rare opportunities where you read a book and you are just hooked from the first page. I feel like it's very rare for me to find a book like that, and this did it. And this is just such a fun, cute romance about our two main characters, and it's a fake dating story, so obviously they start fake dating, and then, you know, with all good fake dating stories, it turns into something more. And I just loved this. I really enjoyed the characters, and one of our main characters, Becca, her mum, owns a bakery. So, you know, there's lots of baking involved, which I really enjoyed. And I just really love the relationship between our two main protagonists as well, kind of when it becomes something more, but also when they're fake dating, because one of them is very popular, the other one is quite shy and reserved, and just puts her head down and gets on with life. And I really love how their kind of two worlds come together, and they kind of build this relationship and realise that maybe they have more in common than they first thought. And it's just so charming. So if you ever need a pick-me-up book, or a book that's just going to make you smile and feel all warm and fuzzy inside, I definitely recommend this. It was just so much fun to read, and I can't wait to see what Alex comes out with in the future. Next up we have Heartstopper Volume 3 by Alice Oseman, and this should be no surprise. You guys should know how much I love the Heartstopper series, and I feel like this third volume just took it to a whole other level. And it is kind of spoilery, but I'll try my best not to. So basically, this graphic novel follows Nick and Charlie as they go on a school trip to Paris, and it's basically, the majority of it is through Paris. And even though it is still cute and fluffy and wonderful like the other two volumes, it definitely delves into some deeper and darker topics, such as mental illness, specifically self-harm and eating disorders. So if you ever want to pick this book up, just be aware of that before going into it. and it also talks about Charlie and Nick taking their relationship to the next level, like starting to come out to their peers and just being more comfortable with being a couple like out in public. And I just really enjoyed this. I love the conversations that they had in here. I actually tabbed some bits, which I don't tend to do with graphic novels, but I just had to, and again I just really enjoyed it, and I love being able to see more of Nick and Charlie's friendship group and kind of seeing all the friends and all the relationships there, and it's just so wonderful. And I cannot wait for the 4th volume, which comes out in May next year I think, because I feel that's going to be amazing, and I believe it goes into more of the mental health side of this, kind of dealing with Charlie's eating disorder and all that sort of thing, which I feel like is going to be very important read, and I cannot wait to read it. But yes, I really adore this book, and I cannot wait for the 4th volume to come out next year. Next up we have another Alice Oseman book, which is Loveless, and this book has been out everywhere. You have probably seen it everywhere when this book first came out. I have been looking forward to this book like since I first heard Alice talk about it, since I pre-ordered it like last autumn, and it was definitely worth the wait. I hadn't read an Alice book in ages, like an actual novel of hers, in a while before reading this, so it was really lovely to be back in her world, and this is also her biggest book as well, which I wasn't complaining about, and I really enjoyed this story. It's basically about our main character called Georgia, and it's about her first year at university and kind of the trials and tribulations of navigating her first year, but it's also about her discovering her sexuality, as she is asexual and aromantic. And asexuality is something that I don't really know a lot about, but so I was really looking forward to kind of educating myself, because this book is also Own Voices, and I was not disappointed. I learnt so much from this book, and I also related to a lot of it as well. I related to Georgia a lot as a character, and I found that really wonderful, and I love kind of seeing Georgia's growth of discovering her sexuality and what it is, and learning to accept it and be comfortable in it. And I also love the friendships in here. I love Georgia's little group of friends, and I love one of the relationships that happens in here. Like, if you know what I'm talking about, then you know. But I really enjoyed this book so much, and it was so funny as well. Like, some of the lines are absolute hooters, but it's also very emotional at the same time, and I just adored it. I think this might be my favourite Alice Oseman book to date. Like, I know that's probably quite hard, like a difficult decision, but I think it is, just because it resonated with me so much. So I really adored this, and I don't think we're going to get another Alice novel for a while, which is a shame, but honestly we get Heartstopper next year, so I'm happy. But yeah, I really enjoyed this book, and I'm so glad that it lived up to my expectations. Next up we have Mine by Emily Merrill, and if you recognise that name, you guys will probably know that this book is written by one of my best friends on BookTube, M from A Little Writer M, and I have been meaning to read her book for ages. I've been a very bad friend and just put off reading it for so long. I don't know why, I just hadn't, but I read this maybe about 2 weeks ago from when I am filming this video, and like, it blew me away. And I'm not just saying that because she's my friend. I honestly really love this book. It was so powerful and emotional and impactful, and I just loved so much about it. This book is basically about our main character called Avery, and she is living in York, studying university there, and her boyfriend moves over to work in York and also to be closer to Avery, and she's so excited. But then as time goes on, their relationship starts to change, and I'm not going to say much more than that, but this book does deal with toxic relationships and domestic abuse, so again, please be aware of that if you ever want to pick this book up. And this was just so powerful. It did take me a little while to get into this book. It took me maybe a good couple of chapters, 50 to 70 pages, to kind of fully get into it and to get used to the writing style, but once I was in, and it's one of those books where I had to keep putting it down every now and again because Luke made me so angry. But I love the friendship groups in here as well. I really enjoyed the characters. I loved Eliza and I loved Beckett, and the writing style was really unique as well. I feel like Emily's writing style kind of reminds me of Libby Page's to a certain extent. The fact that her writing style seems so fresh, and the language that she uses and the descriptions that she uses as well. It's just so fresh and refreshing compared to a lot of other books that I read, which I really, really enjoyed. And it's just such an important novel, and I feel like it is a book that a lot of people should read, obviously if you are comfortable with reading about these topics. But yeah, it took me on an emotional roller coaster of a ride, but I'm so proud of Em for writing this book and putting it out into the world. I honestly cannot wait to read whatever she has up her sleeve next. But yeah, I really, really enjoyed this book, and if you have not picked it up yet, I highly recommend that you do. Next up, we have The Authenticity Project by Claire Pooley. And this is a book that was, I don't know if it was on my most anticipated releases of the year. It was on like a books I'm excited to read video, I think. And I was so lucky when one of my subscribers, Abby, sent me this book. So thank you so much, Abby, if you're watching this. And obviously I loved it because, you know, this book is in this video. And this is the kind of adult contemporary that I love. It is multiple perspective. There are 6 different perspectives in this book, which may seem like a lot, but the characters are very different, so you do kind of get to know their personalities in different ways, and they're very distinctive. And it's basically about, it starts off in Monica's cafe, where this old man named Julian, leaves a book in her cafe called The Authenticity Project, where he has basically written out his truth in this book. And it starts off with Monica finding this book, and she reads Julian's story, and then she writes her own truth in it, and then the book gets passed around all these different characters, but at the same time they build a community around each other, and they better each other, and they kind of get to know each other on a more personal level other than just through this book. And I just adored it so much. I love books that have a sense of community in it, and I actually really enjoy having books with older characters in. Julian was my favourite character in this. He was so eccentric, he's an artist, and he just kind of live his own fantasy, but you still love him for that. And I just absolutely adore this book. It's sad, emotional, it will make you happy, it just makes you feel all the feels. It's a beautiful book. I loved the writing in this again, and also this does deal with substance abuse, which is Own Off Voices, so again, just be aware of that before going into this book. But I just really, really love this book. If you are looking for a really lovely adult contemporary with a beautiful meaning, wonderful characters and a charming storyline, I highly recommend you pick this up. It's just so wonderful, and I cannot wait to see what Claire comes out with in the future. Next up, we have Emma by Jane Austen, and I was not planning on picking this book up this year. I don't know why, but I went to go and see the film back in February, and I liked the film, but I was a little bit confused by some of the, some of the storyline. So I read the book, and then I went to go and see the film again with my mum as she hadn't seen it, and I love this book. Along with Persuasion, I think this might be my favourite Jane Austen book, as in like the actual novel. Obviously you guys should know what this book is about, but I love Jane Austen. Obviously my channel is kind of themed around, like my channel name is around the idea of Pride and Prejudice, which is my favourite Jane Austen story, like in terms of like adaptations and just like the general story. But in terms of novels, this is definitely one of my favourite that I've read. And I listened to the audiobook for this, and I can't remember off the top of my head what the narrator was called. I think she was kind of called Jennifer. No, it's not Jennifer Niven. Something to do with Jennifer. But the audiobook that I listened to, like the narrator did a fantastic job. She had really distinct voices for each of the characters. She captured Mrs. Bates and also Emma's father perfectly. Just, it added to the experience, because I actually listened to the audiobook along with reading the book, because even though I love Jane Austen, I do have to really concentrate on reading her books because of the language. But I just really, really loved the story. It was so much fun. The characters were so charming and witty. Emma's just a fantastic character. Like, I think everybody can agree who has read this novel. And it's just so much fun. I'm so glad that I got to read this earlier than I thought I was, because I wasn't even keen on reading it in the first place. I don't know why, but I'm really glad that I did, because I adored it so much. This is, like, yeah, definitely one of my favourite Jane Austen novels to date. and I'm really glad that I finally got to read it because I absolutely adored it. Now we are on to the fourth book on this list, which is the Lido by Libby Page. And Libby is an author that I discovered this year. I actually read the 24-Hour Cafe of hers first, which is her second novel that is currently out, and I did really love that. It probably would have been on this list if I hadn't read it during a reading slump, because it took me like a month, over a month. It took me a long time to read it, which there's nothing wrong with that, but I don't feel like I got my full enjoyment out of it, even though I related to it so much because I am currently in a very similar position to the main characters of the 24-Hour Cafe. So even though it's a book I could really relate to, I feel like it just isn't on this list because I didn't get my full enjoyment out of it because I wasn't in the right mindset to read it, which is a real shame. So I'm definitely going to have to reread it in the future, and I feel like I would definitely enjoy it even more. Like, I still really loved it, but it just didn't quite make it onto this list. However, I was not in a reading slump when I read this book. And this is Libby's debut, and I didn't realise how much I would enjoy this book because this is basically follows our two main characters, 86-year-old Rosemary and 26-year-old Kate. Kate is a journalist, and she is basically asked to cover the story of the closure of this Lido in Brixton, which is where Rosemary swims every day, and she has done since she was a child. And it's just so lovely, this book. You have obviously dual perspectives in this book, and the characters are charming, and it's basically about the relationship between these two women coming together to save this Lido. But you also get little snippets like the 24-Hour Cafe of all these other different characters, like whether it's some of their friends, some of the people from the market in Brixton, the people who go to the Lido. You kind of get a little glimpse into their lives as well, which is absolutely charming. And again, Libby's writing is beautiful, and I really love the sense of community in this book. I feel like Libby does such an amazing job when it comes to community and kind of relationships, whether it's friendships or romantic relationships in her books. I just adore it so much, and yeah, I really love this book. It is kind of sad also, but I just love everything about it. It gave me all the feels, it's beautiful, and I cannot wait for Libby's third book to come out next year, The Island. I'm just so excited. I cannot wait. She's definitely become one of my favourite authors after reading her books this year, and yeah, I cannot wait for her other book to come out next year. Now we're on to the last three books on this list, and honestly these are probably all equal on this list because I just adore them all so much. So the first one I haven't really talked about on my channel actually because I haven't done a recent reads video yet. But that book is The Girl and the Goddess by Nikita Gill. This book took me by surprise. I honestly didn't know what to expect from this book, apart from the fact that it was a coming of age story, and it is a debut novel in verse by Nikita Gill, who is a poet. So this is her debut novel, and I didn't know much about it, apart from the fact that it's kind of to do with goddesses and it's a coming of age story. But honestly, this book blew me away, and I'm so glad that I decided to pick it up because I absolutely adored it. This novel is basically about our main character Paro, and it is just basically her growing up. It is the story of her growing up from birth to when she's 18 years old and off to university. And this book is split into three sections: childhood, teenagehood, or teenager, however you prefer to say it, and adulthood. So it's set into three sections, and it is about Paro growing up, and there are different parts of this book where gods and goddesses come to visit her to tell her stories. And this book is just wonderful. It tackles so many topics. There are a lot of trigger warnings in this book, and there is like a whole half a page on here of trigger warnings, so just be aware of that, such as to do with mental health, bigotry, biphobia, bullying, child abuse, depression, guilt, homophobia, internalized misogyny, poverty, racism, sexual assault, violence, war, and more. So obviously there are quite a few, so make sure that you read the trigger warning list if you ever want to pick this book up. But this is so beautiful. I have read one of Nikita's poetry collections before and I liked it, but I wasn't a massive fan. But I feel like her writing transcribes into like a novel-esque so well. Like, it's so beautiful, and you really learn to love these characters, to root for Paro. And I really loved the learning about the Indian culture and all the Hindu mythology in this book. It is packed with it. I really loved how the topics were handled in this book, even though I can't personally speak for the representation of the majority of them. But you just learn to see Paro grow through so much, and you kind of see how all these stories that the god and goddesses tell her kind of help her through her journey into adulthood. And it's just a really beautiful coming of age story, really powerful and impactful. And if you are looking for a new novel in verse, honestly, I think you should pick this book up. It is absolutely fantastic. If Nikita ever comes out with another novel in the future, I am definitely going to be reading it. I'm going to be rereading this throughout the years in the future. I enjoyed it so much, and yeah, it's just absolutely beautiful, stunning, and I cannot recommend this book enough. Sorry if the lighting keeps changing, it's getting actually quite dark in my room now, and it's like 12 o'clock, it's lunchtime, it shouldn't be happening, but anyway, we are on to the last two books now, and these two should be no surprise if you have been watching my channel throughout the year, because like I talk about them non-stop. And the first one is The Diary of a Confused Feminist by Kate Weston, and I haven't talked about this book in a video in a while, I think, but if you have been here since the beginning of the year, you will know that I read an arc of this in January and I just fell in love with it. It was so good, so hilarious. I have honestly never laughed at a book so much in my entire life, as Kate is a stand-up comedian, so that really transcends into this book. And if you love Angus Thornton Perfect Snogging and you love Miranda, I think you will really love this book. It just has so much humour in it. But this book is also very serious at the same time. This book follows our main character called Kat, and she is in year 11 and she's decided that she's going to be a feminist, so she tries to basically do what she believes a feminist should do, and it ends up with a lot of embarrassing moments, a lot of mistakes, and kind of winding herself up in a little bit of trouble. And even though this book is very funny, like I said, it also tackles so many different topics, such as obviously feminism, one of the main ones, and also friendships, bullying, mental health, which is such a big one. I really, really love the mental health representation in this, as it's something that's very personal to me that I could really relate to. It also talks about therapy, which I can also really relate to, kind of the process that Kat goes through with this, and also like what it means to be a woman, and just so much stuff. I just adore this book with all of my heart. I probably don't need to talk about it much more because I have talked about it enough, but if you need a book that's going to make you laugh out loud, and I'm not kidding, I've genuinely never laughed so much at a book before, that's going to make you laugh, that but will also make you very emotional and also tackle some very important topics, I honestly think you should pick this book up. So many more people need to read it. It's just an absolute joy. This is actually my finished copy because my arc is up there, and I need to reread it at some point because there's a few extra added bits in this. But yeah, I love this book, and even though it is written from a 15-year-old's perspective, I still managed to really relate to it, and I wish that there would have been more books like this when I was 15 years old. But yeah, I absolutely adore this book. It was wonderful and beautiful and hilarious, and please go and pick this book up if you haven't already, because it's just so wonderful, and I honestly cannot wait to see what Kate comes out with next. And the last book on my favourite books of 2020 list is going to be no surprise at all, and that is a Snowfall A Silver by Laura Wood. You guys knew it was coming. You should know how much I love Laura Wood's books. I did a whole reading vlog for this book that is non-spoiler, so check that out in the description if you want to go and watch that video and hear more of my thoughts on this book. But if you do not know what this book is about, if I haven't said it enough, this book is set in 1931, and it's just about our main character Freya, who runs away from her home in Cornwall to become an actress in London, and she ends up getting a job with a travelling theatre company, and it is about what happens on tour and everything, and this is set like late autumn to like winter Christmas time, whereas Laura's other books are set during the summer. And I just adore this book. It's actually a companion novel to Laura's first YA book, which is A Sky Painted Gold, as this follows the younger sister of our main protagonist, Lou. And I just adore this book. Obviously it is on this list for a reason. It's got everything that a Laura Wood book has. Beautiful writing, immersive world, even though it's the real world, but you know, the writing is very immersive as well as beautiful. The characters are charming, they have so many different personalities. I love being able to revisit some of the characters from A Sky Painted Gold in this, such as Lou and Robert, and how their relationship is 2 years down the line. And I think Laura Wood's books also have lovely messages in them as well, because even though they're generally marketed as romance novels, I don't feel like the romance is always the main part of the book. There's always something that's a lot more prominent as well as the romance, to do with like the careers and kind of the aspirations of our main protagonists. And Freya is somebody who knows what she wants to do, unlike the characters from Laura's other books. And then throughout the book she kind of realises that maybe what she wanted most her entire life isn't what she wants anymore, and it makes her question what she wants to do with herself, with her career and all that sort of thing. So I really love that obviously these books do have beautiful, charming, wonderful romances in them, but they also have a lot other messages as well. And I love that these books kind of challenge some of the views that were going around during this time, during like the 1930s, 1920s, and kind of beliefs about women and what they should do, and having really strong female characters, which I really adored. So yeah, I'm not going to talk about this anymore because you guys know how much I love her books, but this has obviously had to be number one of my number ones on this list because I adored it, and I cannot wait for Laura's book to come out next year. I don't really know what it's going to be about. It's going to be very different to this because it's set in Edwardian England, I think, which is going to be very intriguing. So yeah, obviously this book is on this list. How could it not be? Yeah, and I'm very excited for Laura's book to come out next year. So excited! So those are all of my favourite books that I read during 2020. I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. I have had an amazing reading year. I have discovered some new authors. I have discovered some absolutely beautiful, wonderful, stunning books from the inside out. And reading has definitely been a highlight of this year, even though not everything has gone to plan, unfortunately, in my personal life and obviously with the world in general. But let's hope that 2021 is going to be better. I hope it will. I've got a good feeling about it, and hopefully it'll be an even more amazing reading year for all of us. Let me know in the comments if you have read any of these books and your opinions on them, and also let me know one of your favourite books that you have read during 2020, because I would love to know as always. If you like this video then please make sure to give it a thumbs up, and if you'd like to see more bookish videos from me then make sure you hit the subscribe button and the bell icon so you'll be noted every time I post a new video. As always, I will leave links to my social media along with the links to my Goodreads in the description down below for you guys. But thank you guys so much for watching. I appreciate you so much, and I will see you again very soon. Bye!